Hey there, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to episode 3, or I guess top... do I even call them episodes? I don't know. The answer is, who knows? Regardless, welcome to the third one, where we talk about all of the Melee associates. And before we get started, I do have a bit of a erg to talk about, and that is with Gaius. Gaius put me into kind of a rough situation, because as I kind of mentioned in the introductory video, Gaius is showing up here as the representative Tales of Xillia 2 because otherwise Xillia 2 doesn't really have a melee associate. You know, you've got Luger, and really that's it. Like every other character in the game is a repeat of Xillia, although some of them, you know, like Gaius and Muse were antagonists in Xillia 1, but still it's like there aren't a lot of new characters in Xillia 2. Other than, again, Luger and L. But L's not even combat character, so that's weird. Regardless, I'm already getting sidetracked. This bodes well. The problem that I have with Gaius is that we're going to have an antagonist video too, and there is no way I can argue that Gaius is anything but an antagonist. Like, he is the main antagonist of Xillia, so Gaius has to feature in the main antagonist video. And it just feels kind of crappy to have Gaius double dip. You know, to have Gaius sit here and get fully considered for 2 different top 10s when we're trying to use this for ranking. So the obvious solution is to just say, okay, don't do that. Instead, we'll go ahead and have this video only look at Xillia 2's Gaius, and then the antagonist video can only look at the Xillia 1 guys. They're very different roles anyway, so it's pretty easy to tell them apart. The problem with that is if we do that, then doesn't that logically mean we have to do the same thing with Zelos and Zaveid? Because Zelos is the Symphonia 2 representative, even though he features in Symphonia 1 for exactly the same reason that Gaius ends up being in Xillia 2's. And then Zaveid is a kind of a huge character in Berseria, even though he is Asteria's representative. And the short answer is, yeah, I like Zelos. I might be able to not really look too deep. I mean, like Zelos, I can't really only look at his Symphonia 2 entry because Symphonia 2 doesn't really develop any characters outside of Emil very well. So I kind of have to talk about Zelos in his entirety, or he's just not really a character, practically. And then Zaveid feels even worse somehow. Like, he's so, like, almost all of the really interesting stuff about Zaveid comes from Berseria. His Zestiria character just seems incomplete and weird. So it would feel really weird to have a top 10 and just, like, force myself to exclude a lot of information that is the best information about the characters in question. So I end up in a situation where I just kind of have to be unfair, and that is that, sorry, Gaius, you get arbitrarily cut in half and nobody else does. And yeah, that feels shitty. But it feels less shitty than the other 2 alternatives of cutting out all, like, doing this ranking of characters, but refusing to look at half of the character in question. Like, Gaius, it makes sense because he'll show up again and have the other half counted separately. But with Zaveid and Zelos, they would just never show up again, and we'd never talk about them again. And it would feel very incomplete. So, before we get into this, I just wanted to make sure that was clear. So, number 10. Number 10 is going to be Suzu Fujibayashi from Tales of Fantasia. She is an interesting character, and frankly, I actually forgot about this until I was going through the list. Suzu is, as far as I can remember, the only optional character in Tales history, at least in Tales games I played. And I'm honestly not 100% sure why they got away from that concept. I kind of feel like they shouldn't have. Like, it's kind of awesome. The big problem with Suzu is that she's a hidden character because apparently when Fantasia first came out, she wasn't even a character. She was, like, added in later. Sort of like how Chester got massively expanded. Like, he was originally a character, but he like never gained new abilities the whole game. He just hit harder. But yeah, Suzu originally was just like didn't even have a portrait and never joined you and was just this kind of awesome character that was in the background. So because of that, it's hard not to notice how kind of disjointed and not fully part of the plot she is. She has a kind of cool little story going on, fairly cliche if I'm being honest. Like we do end up with she's a ninja and she is stuck between upholding honor and protecting her family, which is just yep, okay, yeah, that's the ninja story. Like we've seen that before. I do love her introduction where you kind of save her from that electrical trap and then run into her again later. Like I did appreciate that. And then the little like trial that you can do back at her home village was awesome. Even though again fairly cliched. And the fact that she was a descendant of Shino was super, super cool. But the big problem she has is that I mean, you guys know me. And you guys know how much I like a character arc. And Suzu completely doesn't have one. She is the exact same character from the time you meet her until the time that, the game ends. And so, yeah, she ends up being number 10. I'm sorry. I like her. I'd love to hang out with her, except that she kind of feels underage, which is creepy. But I don't think she actually is. I think that's just, again, people drawing things weird. Number 9. Malik Caesar. Or is it Caesar? I actually think it's Caesar. And yeah, Malik... The big problem with Malik when I went back and really looked at him is that it honestly feels like they were trying to get the Jade Lightning to strike again. Because, like, he's snarky, he's older than most of the rest of the party. He's got a tragic backstory involving the death of someone that was really important to him. I mean, he's Jade. Except he doesn't pull it off. He's not quite as cool as Jade. And a lot of the big reason for that is that he doesn't... Jade kind of had this like air of being above it all, and Malik didn't. And so Malik's kind of attitude of being, world wizened didn't really kind of follow through because it was just like some inconsistencies the way his character kind of came forward. Also, kind of like Suzu, the dude didn't really have a character arc. And this actually happens a lot, and I feel bad because I'm going to say this a lot, but what he had was a backstory that we didn't know, and then throughout the course of the story, we found out about it. That's not the same as having a character arc. And I will say there's some characters that do very, very well that's all it is, but they just ended up making a great impression upon me, and Malik just didn't. He feels a little disjointed from the world. Like, honestly, from what I remember, it's like he had that one frozen area, whose name I've forgotten, where his backstory was very, very, very prevalent, and he was very, very, like, closely tied into the ongoing plot. And then the rest of the game, everywhere except for that one place, he was just kind of in the party. And he didn't really necessarily feel like he belonged, which was, oof. He kind of felt like the game designers just sort of like shoved Malik into the game because they needed a world-weary, kind of jaded individual, no pun intended, in order to kind of offset Asbel's just overwhelming optimism and belief that everything would work out. They needed a counterbalance to that, but then it didn't really feel like he fit. I do have to say, he did crack me. Like, even though I've just spent the last couple of minutes shitting on him, I did absolutely love just his ongoing blatant lies to Sophie, because Sophie would buy anything. Those were great. Although, I kind of feel like he's the straight man to Sophie. Sophie made that comedy work, but it was just everyone else being like, oh my god, Malik, stop. It's great. Number 8. Erston Outway. I mean... Okay, Gaius. We all know his name is Gaius, but he went by Erston because he was in disguise, and that's one of the things I love the most about his kind of portrayal. In that it's like, oh, I'm the king of the land of the spirits. I meant to look this up, and I completely forgot. I've forgotten the name of the two places. I swear, if it's not Silverot and Tetheala, I do not remember the names of any of the worlds in the Tales series. But that it's like, I'm the king, and I'm going to go incognito by looking the exact same and using my birth name. And to be fair, he had kind of tried to hide his birth name, so it's not as bad as I'm kind of making it sound. But it's still just sort of like I'm going to go undercover, but I'm going to do almost nothing in order to try and make sure I stay undercover. Lol. Um, his character in Xillia 2, I do like it a bit, even though it's a little shallow. One of the big problems, and this is a bit with the way Xillia 2 is presented, is that none of the characters get a lot of development outside of their individual and unique sub-stories. It's like the main story doesn't involve any of the side characters, hardly at all. Shoot a little bit, but even then only a little bit. And everything else is just in these like character-specific sub-stories. But I did like Gaius' sub-story. It really kind of feels like he's from such a martial background that he kind of has an expectation that people are going to be generally forthright and honest. And so, like, I remember just how haunted and horrified he is to learn that one of the people that he was helping actually totally did murder people, and then lied about it to him. And he's just like, wait, what? What? Huh? Very, very, very happy and a joy to see that. That said, again, it's one of the problems that he had a very deadpan attitude, a little bit actually like Malik. Now that I think about it, but nothing really happened with him. He was just sort of there. He was there. He was awesome, but he wasn't fleshed out. He was kind of like a continuation of Xillia 1. We already talked about why his character in Xillia 1 can't actually matter here. So, very, very, very cool character. One of my favorites of the series, to be sure. But in terms of, that's one thing I should probably say, and I think I've said this before. This isn't necessarily, hey, these are my favorite characters. These are what are the best characters. And to be best, it has to be more than just I really happen to like them. Though, admittedly, there are some that I just can't rank lower, even though logically I should. I'm just not able to force myself to do it. So there's some give and take here. Number 7, Zelos Wilder. Okay, so Zelos is interesting. And Zelos is interesting because he has a phenomenally interesting backstory and a lot of super, super cool subtext that goes on kind of behind the scenes. He has this facade that he puts on of just being this, like, party hard playboy, not serious, everything's great. And meanwhile, under the surface, he's having to really, really struggle because his whole life, his job was in order to be the chosen and keep Tethayala, vibrant and beautiful, and he knew about the other world, and the two worlds were set against one another. And when the party shows up, he kind of starts to learn more and more and more about what's actually going on beyond just the bare minimum he had been told, and is a little bit horrified by what he learns, which is cool. I mean, like, I'm glad that he's learning stuff, but the reason that what ends up sort of happening is that he kind of goes against what he was raised to do, and then he questions whether or not he should be doing that. And there's very, very deep sort of back and forth with him. Also, you can kind of see it in his relationship with is it Celis? I had this written down. 1 second. Yeah, it is Celis. Okay. For some reason I had Ceres also in my head. And so, like, watching the two of them, you can see how deeply, deeply, deeply he actually cares about her. He just can't express it. So much of his character is about, I have these thoughts and feelings, and I can't actually put them into words. And that's really cool. I really like that about him. Here's the problem. You're left almost to your own devices to figure that out about him. He very, very much does a great job of keeping his thoughts and feelings out of his emotion and off of his expressions, which is a little frustrating because I want to really, really like him, but throughout all of the main story, because the game designers can't trust that you would figure this out about him, he just kind of acts like a annoying prat, and it's not something I enjoy. Like, the character he actually shows is very, very annoying and very, very unlikable, at least for me. So that kind of ends up with him being low on the list, despite the fact he's got a lot of potential, and I really, really wish I could have spent more time with the actual Zelos, not just the you guys have seen my other videos, and you know how much I get annoyed at Lloyd for just everything's gonna work out, and Zelos just is more of the crappy same. But you know he's not. You know he takes this stuff super seriously. He just hides the way he feels for everyone else, and I'm like, just stop it, Zelos. Number 6, Rokorou Rangetsu. Okay, so I also really, really like Rokorou's personality. I know I keep saying that, like every single time person I start off with, I'm just like, I really like this person. But Rokorou, he kind of reminds me of Suzu with being the Eastern honor-bound individual, and also kind of reminds me of Suzu as not actually being that unique a character. Like a lot of what Rokorou is something that you would suspect. He also has, again, I feel like I just say this over and over again. He doesn't actually have that much of an arc. He starts off as someone that is really, really, really motivated in order to fight his brother, and over the course of the story, he fights his brother. And then after his brother is dead, he just keeps fighting, and that's kind of his whole arc. But that said, he has a couple of moments that really, really make him shine and kind of pushes him above all the other characters that I basically said the same thing about. Some of the big stuff is, first of all, could we just talk for a second about the fight he has with Shigure that is just amazing? First of all, before he gets to fight, the way it starts off with the two of them just completely understanding that this is where their relationship ends and drinking together, it really, really kind of cements that they are so, so, so happy to really be pushing each other to the limit. Push it to the limit. Okay, I had to. And then the actual fight with him coming in to stop the mystic art that freaking Shigure uses every 3 seconds. It's ridiculous. I'll block you every time. Really, really felt great. His just, quiet acceptance of, even though he likes to fight, Shigure asked him to spare Morkram, and so he does. There's no even question about it. He's just like, let's go. I really, really appreciate the character. And again, kind of going back to what I said about, I think it was Gaius. But if this were purely about how much I enjoy and appreciate characters, Rokorou would be very, very high. He very much is a standout and very, very appreciative. But in terms of being one of the best characters, there needs to be more to him. All the cool little dressing can go around him and elevate him, but it can only elevate you so far. And then you run into characters that actually have a deeply fulfilling arc. Number 5, Karol Capel. Oh my god, did I dislike Karol for the longest time. Like, literally ever since I met him, I'm like, why is this kid here? I don't like him. I don't understand why he's in this game. Who thought this was a good idea? He's a coward. He's constantly talking big about stuff he very clearly has no idea what he's talking about. And even what they tried to do to make him endearing, like, he's not very good at naming stuff. I mean, no, that's not funny. That's not clever. That's just, even his humor is annoying. And then we got to the blade drifts. And of course, I think everyone that's played Vesperia knows exactly what scene I'm talking about, where everyone kind of got paralyzed and was helpless, and Karol was put into a situation where he had to choose between his cowardice that had protected him and been with him since day one, and actually losing the closest thing to a family he had. He had bounced from guild to guild to guild, and finally had found one that actually accepted him for all this bullshit. And yeah, he rose up and he said there are some things worth fighting for, and he fought, and it was great. It was wonderful to see. Also, his whole little sub-story with Nan was fantastic, and let's not forget, kind of the backing and the grounding he gave to the City of Guilds and the, what I'm going to call, Don Whitehorse incident. We'll talk more about that when we get to the NPC Associate episode. But yeah, he does a lot to build on a lot of the best scenes in Vesperia. He has a super rewarding personal character arc. Though I actually do wish more happened with him and Non. Like, it kind of felt like something was going to go, like, that story needed more of a conclusion. It just never really got one, or at least I never saw one. Um, and yeah, by the end of the game, he may be one of my favorite characters of Vesperia. He was very, very rewarding, and he absolutely grew on me. I just wish it hadn't taken half the damn game before I could, not feel my shoulders rigid every single time he'd open his freaking mouth. Number 4. Zaveid the Oathkeeper. So again, Zaveid, honestly, more than Zelos, Zaveid was like, no, I have to include the other games, because if I was just looking at Zestiria, Zaveid would not do nearly as well. Frankly, a lot of that is just Zestiria handled Zaveid badly, because Zestiria handled a lot of things badly. The way he kind of showed up, where it's just like, oh, Dezel died. And then before you even have really time to process that, Zaveid's like, hey guys, I'm here. I'm going to wear Dezel's hat. And it's just like, what? What? It just felt monstrously disrespectful, and he was just sort of like, I think, honestly, until I played Berseria, when I thought back, I kind of like, when I thought back to Zestiria, I didn't have a real good impression of who Zaveid was. Like, he and Dezel just kind of floated together. It's like, there's a wind dude. I had a pretty good, like, impression of Lila. Definitely remembered Mikleo and Edna, of course, but the Dezel and Zaveid just sort of like existed in a soup in my memory. But after Berseria, I remember who Zaveid is. Zaveid is a great, 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 great character, but mostly because Berseria fleshed him out so much. You see him start off as like almost a generic RPG protagonist of like, no, killing is never the answer. We should be able to spare everyone. And then throughout his friendship, I can call it that, his friendship slash rivalry slash protagonistry, like whatever the term is for him and Eisen, just kind of learn and grow to a certain, like, no, there is a point where being a Hellion is going to rob you of everything that makes you you, and the closest thing you can give to mercy is to honor their memory by putting a stop to the things that they're doing. And the scene wherever Eisen actually fought the dragon, and Zaveid's just on the sidelines, crumpled, watching, not wanting to watch, wanting to look away, but not willing to allow himself to work away, was just absolute magnificence. Really, really, really happy to see that, happen. Also, like, we just have to talk. Like, obviously, this would be the case even without Berseria, but his theme, we can't not talk about his theme. His theme is so good. The little, like, twangy guitar, right whenever it comes in, it just immediately makes you feel, I don't want to say comfortable, but it brings a smile to my face every freaking single time. It's amazing. The only real negative I have to say about Zaveid, other than the way Zestiria handled him, is that because his better arc was in the second game he was in, you kind of knew how he was going to end up from the first second he showed up, but still, the journey was enjoyable even if the destination was known. Number 3. Regal Bryant. So Regal is interesting because Regal almost feels like a violation of what I've kind of said. Because I will be honest, Regal doesn't necessarily have the best character arc. Most of what makes Regal stand out so much in my head, what makes me like him so much, is just how unfalteringly ethical he is. So to explain that a little more better, that is very, very good grammar. The thing about Regal is that he, like, Presea hates him, and is like refuses to do anything close to working with him because he killed her. I think it was sister. It was either sister or cousin. I think sister. And Regal just completely goes along with that and is like, no, she is right to hate me. I hate myself. He has this like massive, massive, massive stone of penitence that he carries around with him, and even though logically he knows he was set up and was put in a situation where he had to do that, he just can't. His heart is so big, he can't forgive himself for what he did, and he can't even bring himself to defend himself. And yet you could argue that he doesn't really have a character arc. We just learn more about him, which is arguably true. But at the same time, the real arc that he has or participates in is kind of Presea's arc, where as she travels with him and she learns more and more and more about him, um, she gets to the point where I don't know if she ever really forgives him, but at least stops condemning him, which actually is a kind of a cool um, change in her attitude, and also it sort of redeems him as well. Um, I think Presea being able to move on past what happens once she learns more about his history kind of allows him to stop carrying it around like a leaden weight as well. So, like, it was very, very, like, watching that and seeing the change in his overall character after he had stopped hating himself. It seemed like every minute, every day was very, very, very. I say very too much, but it really kind of touched me. And even after all these years, it sort of still resonates with me. I remember how happy I was with the grace at which that was handled. Number 2, Alvin Vint Svent. Okay, first of all, can I just ask, why are so many of them like melee focused characters that betray the party? Alvin betrays the party freaking like 4 times or something. Zelos betrays the party. Malik ends up being a boss fight at some point. I even think you have to fight Suzu, but I can't actually remember. That might not be the case. But yeah, it just seems to happen a lot. And one of the things that I'll say, even though it was not super, it was funny, but it was meta funny that happened with Alvin, was that so many times we've seen it where it's like, oh, this person betrays you, and then you beat them up, and then you forgive them, and they have a change of heart and are your best friend forever. And then Alvin, no. First of all, they make no secret of the fact that he's going to betray you. Like, literally, the time you meet him and he murders someone, and the party doesn't know what happened, but the player is left absolutely under, like, with no question that this guy isn't a helpful dude, bro. So, the big thing and he eventually betrays the party, and then the party like overcomes what he did and he apologizes, but then he just keeps doing it. Like you kind of keep expecting him to have the normal change of heart that is so common, and he just keeps just not doing it, which is kind of hilarious, frankly. um and then eventually, whenever a party member dies, I don't know why I'm like trying to avoid spoilers, but I kind of am if it doesn't directly relate to Alvin. Party member ends up dying, and he takes it super hard, and he's like, I did all this for this result, and the result didn't happen, and now I've done things that I can never make up for. And then he still betrays the party one last time, but after the last one, when he actually almost kills someone he was not intending to and was not mentally prepared to hurt, he just does absolutely just breaks into a shell of himself. And I think it's because it took so many tries. I think it's because it felt like such a legitimate journey. Like, looking at it compared to Sheena from Symphonia, Sheena has a change of heart damn near immediately. Like, she fights you twice, and then she's like, okay, I'm with you now, and everyone just immediately accepts her. Freaking Colette was accepting her from even before she had gotten to the point where she had changed. It was kind of funny and kind of... But I'm rambling because I'm amazing. The big thing that kind of like with Alvin that makes me like him so much is, first of all, how long it seemed like a very, very genuine actual change of heart. It seemed like he was forced, circumstances happened that actually forced him to reevaluate his life in a way I accepted. I don't want to call it a realistic way, but a way I accepted. And then you kind of saw that come to fruition in the way he ended up treating Isla. Because the old Alvin would have just immediately just executed her, because he had every reason to hate her. And he didn't. He wasn't prowling for blood. He had kind of realized the pointlessness of assassination, if not violence in general. And number 1, Guy, Cecil. So what I love about Guy is that Guy is basically, back when I was talking about Zelos and talking about how much Zelos kind of frustrated me because I really, really loved his inner character, but his outer character got in the way. Guy is exactly how I wanted that to be handled. Guy is perfect in at least that regard. Because Guy also, like Zelos, has a interior personality that is very, very, very different than his public personality. Public personality is fun-loving and, buddy and here to be supportive and yay, I'm your best friend. And then interior is some very, very, very dark thoughts that he's wrestling with and you never see. However, the big difference is that ultimately what Guy ends up doing is realizing that his murderous impulses are not really who he wants to be, and he turns away from them. He says, you know what, the mask is more comfortable than myself, and he becomes the mask. So what ends up happening is that the character that was fun-loving and enjoyable ends up being the actual Guy. We actually find out about all this turbulence that went on within his soul. We never saw the struggle, we just saw the aftermath and the decision that, no, he does want to be our friend. So that was very, very, very... I'm doing it again. I swear I just used very to make room, but it was well handled, and it left me enjoying the character completely, instead of being annoyed because the public-facing character was someone I didn't like, and then trying to have the secret character redeem it. The other thing that is very, very helpful about Guy is whenever we found more about him, we found out why he was so afraid to be touched by women. It was tragic and it was shattering, but it was very much they treated this for laughs, and then it becomes suddenly deadly, amazingly, ouchily serious, and kind of punched me in the gut. And I still remember how much that episode sort of impacted me, because I was not expecting the game to go that heavy. And it left an impression with me. And that's, to a certain extent, in terms of my favorite characters, yeah, a character that can... I'm not saying that the characters from the first games have an easier time making up my list, but I will say it does certainly strike me when I immediately remember a whole bunch about a character, despite having not played their game in 7 years or something. A lot of the characters, I don't remember a lot of their details after it's been so long, because they didn't leave an impression, but Guy definitely did. Also, I just want to point out real quick, looking at the piece, originally I was going to have the 6 members of the party be set 3 apiece to each of the tables, but when I saw a Guy came in number 1, I said, there is no freaking way Guy is going to sit next to Mila. So he ends up by the door. Had to change as we go along. See you next time, guys, and sorry these take so long to come out. Like I said, life is busy.